At the end of June 2015, Panasonic invited AV Forums out to Hollywood for a series of presentations and demonstrations of how the new 4K TVs can display images just as the director intended. First stop was the Panasonic Hollywood Labs, situated in Universal City. Here we were given presentations on the new 4K Pro Studio Master processing chip used in the higher-end 2015 TVs from Panasonic. PHL works with all the standards bodies and the Ultra HD Blu-ray Association to make sure that the images look the same across many devices in the professional world and at home. To further enforce the creator's intent message were cinematographer Darren Okada and digital intermediate colorist Mike Soa. Both spoke about the creative process in Hollywood and why directors, cinematographers and colorists all play a big part in how an image should look within the given film. They also expressed their disappointment that in most cases, when viewed at home, the image doesn't match what was intended to be seen in the cinema. That's because the TVs are not calibrated or accurate out of the box to the standards everyone uses in TV and film in Hollywood and beyond. Next up was Technicolor, in the heart of Hollywood, where the company have worked closely with the creators of film and TV for over 100 years. We were shown a typical grading room, and the colorists explained how they work with the cinematographer and director to decide on the look for the film or TV series, and then the colorists work with that vision to make each scene match. They explained that they use consumer TVs, such as Panasonic's EX900, which are calibrated to make sure the material looks right for viewers at home. They even use the same Klein meter and Kalman software that AV Forums use for our reviews. So we know we're all using the same standards and reference points to assess picture quality. Industry standards are important to make sure there is a consistent image on everything from professional monitors to the TV at home, and THX also pressed home how they test consumer TVs so they know that they are seeing what the creator intended. They also gave us a tour of the old ILM building in San Rafael with the help of effects wizard Phil Tippett, famous for Star Wars and Jurassic Park. This soundstage was used for most of the Star Wars Return of the Jedi effects, shot with miniatures and models made in the workshop next door, but then blown up on stage. With Panasonic paying such close attention to the creator's intent, we caught up with Ron Martin, the director of Panasonic Hollywood Labs, and started by asking when PHL was formed and what it does.
In the early 90s, when Panasonic owned Universal Studios, formally the lab started in 2001 as an incorporated entity, but its foundation goes all the way back to the early 90s when we did the HD TV and the DVD development here.
So what kind of things do you do here at Panasonic Hollywood Labs? Because I think a lot of our listeners won't even know that it really exists.
The lab is primarily engaged in embracing technologies around imaging. So in the case of DVD, and Blu-ray, we develop the encoding systems, the MPEG encoding systems for those formats. We work very closely with our imaging division, both on the capture side for cameras and the display side for televisions and professional displays, projectors. Essentially what we do is we interface, in a sense, where we collaborate with filmmakers, content providers, cinematographers, to find out what their requirements are. And then we do the development to provide solutions for those industries and those particular fields based on their needs, rather than just creating something and offering it to them and hoping that they like it.
So where we are at the moment, there's a lot of buzz about 4K, but what we're actually talking about in the future is not just resolution, is it?
Right. And I must say resolution is very important. What I like to say is screen resolution enables image resolution. 4K screen resolution enables really only true 2K image resolution. Screen resolutions that are higher will enable higher resolution images. So we do want the evolution of screen resolution to move forward, and indeed it will. But the pixels that are on those screens, we do want to be more colorful. We want higher frame rate so they'll move faster. We want higher dynamics built into them so that we get more true realism in the imaging itself. So it is all of a package of 4K plus frame rate plus HDR plus all the other elements.
I guess there has to be more than just the resolution for the consumer, though, because if you're looking at a TV that's 50 inches and above, you don't actually see the resolution. So there needs to be something else there to push the picture.
In a sense, yes, but again, we don't want to shortchange the role that resolution plays, particularly when we get to scale, because larger TVs that are going into the home, the 60, the 70, the 80, and higher inches, as you scrutinize, and what I always say is that image resolution does invite scrutiny, that idea that you want to lean forward a little bit, you want to scrutinize a little bit of what's actually contained in that image. As you scrutinize, that's when you start to notice the payoff of resolution. So again, it is kind of the central foundation of all other imaging. It starts with resolution.
Now, HDR is the other buzzword, and HDR has been used in photography, still photography, for a long time, and there seems to be a lot of confusion about HDR when it comes to motion pictures. So can you just briefly explain what it means?
Yes, great question. The HDR in photography is essentially the blending of several exposures to capture a full dynamic range of the image, but still display it in a standard dynamic range imaging system, whether it's print or electronic. HDR in motion pictures, what we're trying to do in the next generation televisions, is create a higher dynamic display, which has to do with contrast ratio, which has to do with brightness, the amount of brightness that any one pixel can display at any one time, and it has to do with black levels. So when we talk about HDR and motion imaging, we're talking about moving images that contain richer blacks, higher whites, more accurate grayscale rendition, and more accurate colors throughout the rendition of the image itself.
So again, there's no specifications that have actually been laid down. So what's the industry doing, and what's your role within the industry in pushing towards a standard that everybody can work to?
What PHL is doing in the larger Panasonic corporation on many levels is working with the standards groups, the SMPTE for one, the ITU, ATSC for the broadcasters, DVB in Europe. We're working on standards, and we're very close, I must say, to standards that are achievable, meaning that we have a signal standard that will capture the HDR signal. We'll be able to deliver that both via blu-ray, through streaming, through broadcast. But obviously the work right now is all on the display side, taking that signal and accurately rendering it into a workable space that these displays can get to. The signal itself, we know, is capable of 10,000 nits of actual brightness value. TVs will not be there for a long, long time. So how we take that signal and scale it down to the display capabilities of the TV is a big part of what the standards process is going to look like in the work that we're doing right now. Again, we're right in the thick of that. We collaborate very closely with other manufacturers, with cinematographers, with camera operators, with art departments, with animation groups in certain studios that do a lot of animation. All these elements have to be brought into developing a standard that will work for everybody.
There's obviously a lot of confusion out there. It's good to see that the industry is starting to, get their act together and come together on this. But there's a lot of confusion about colour space. So at the moment, video is 709, Rec 709. In the cinema, you use DCI P3. But in the specifications for 4K Blu-ray and other 4K standards, it's Rec 2020. But my understanding is Rec 2020 is almost impossible to reach, and there's no content in it anyway.
It's almost impossible today. Progress is being made. We're covering more of the color space, the displayable color space that 2020 represents as development goes on. And again, the key in this effort is Rec 2020 as a signaling system is very important. How the TVs, how the projectors, how even flat panel displays, even how phones will interpret those signals is an ongoing process. But if the signal isn't there to begin with and we can't render it elegantly, then we haven't achieved anything. So once the signal is in place and adapted, the manufacturers will start pushing the envelope to get more and more of those colors toward 2020 accuracy. But even if it's, you mentioned P3, which isn't really a formal color space, it's a projector recommendation that cinema uses. As we get closer to those kinds of standards and those kind of display performances, we want to make sure that we do so accurately, and we want to do so with creative intent in mind. But we're always pushing the limit, and we're making some considerable progress.
There's Joel Silver and a couple of other people who are on the display side of things and saying how displays should be set up in the home and so on. They're pushing the idea that Rec 2020 should be used as a container, and then standards are set within that container. Would you agree with that?
I think it's a reasonable approach, yeah. I think it's the best way that we can control what the consumer is going to see without damaging or compromising the image itself. Again, P3 as a cinema working space will be around for a very long time. Once all the work is done around standardization and around performance metrics, then we can start expanding that out, and it will be the same thing on consumer panels. But it makes perfect sense, again, to have that container that contains more than what we want, and then we'll be able to display it when the technology matures.
And just getting back to HDR, the other big thing on the internet at the minute is it's all about the brightness, but actually it's not all about the brightness, is it?
No, it's not. Brightness is a component of it. Accuracy in brightness, whether it's 400 nits or 1,000 nits or 2,000 nits, accuracy in brightness is what it's all about. Accuracy in color rendition throughout that grayscale is what it's all about. What we call color volume, the ability of a display to render colors accurately as it gets brighter, is a huge issue in HDR displays. And what we're trying to do is make sure that, again, as this industry evolves, as these efforts evolve, that we're being accurate along the way, that we're coming up with achievable standards, achievable metrics built on those standards, and that there will not be a compromise to the picture element and the storytelling element behind the pictures.
And finally, we're here to see the new technology. A lot of it we can't talk about in this video, but later in the year we will be able to go into more detail about it. But one of the main things that certainly the theme of the event here is as the director intended, and certainly at AV Forums, it's one of the messages that we always push forward to the consumer and to our members and viewers and so on. How seriously do Panasonic take that?
In a real sense, it's our driving motivation. The Hollywood Lab, since its inception in '93, when we first started high-definition telecine transfers of film content, we always had the engineers and the cinematographer and the creative elements at the console with us, working through these issues. Like I say, it is our primary motive at this point, because the storytelling machine and the storytelling element of this is really what should drive the imagery, not the technology. The technology, I say, is an enabler to storytelling. It's not the story itself. And that's Panasonic's philosophy from the very beginning.
And do you think that the products can get there this year and be able to show the intent of the director perfectly?
The products that we're releasing this year we're very excited about, to say the least. And in the form that they are, we're confident that they will indeed be what the cinematographer and the director and the colorist worked to produce. Again, as we push the limits both of color space and of brightness, the point is that also will be cinematographer intent. And this is an ongoing evolution and a collaboration between creatives and technology companies, and Panasonic has always been right in the middle of that.
And it was interesting today, just finally to wrap up, that you had an actual colorist in who had worked on Oblivion, and we actually went through a few scenes. How helpful is that to you on a technical side when developing these products?
It's immensely helpful. Again, too much of development can take place kind of in a vacuum, where from the engineering side we look at our product and we think, well, gee, this looks terrific. Look how bright, look how colorful. To have both the creative element, the cinematographer, and the technical element of cinematographer and colorist together, in a sense, it really gives us a pathway to follow rather than just kind of moving forward in the dark. And the value of that as a manufacturing and as a consumer electronics manufacturer is absolutely paramount to us.
Well, thanks very much for your time.
My pleasure.